Hey everybody, I am Will Ashton, your usual co-host for Cinemaholics, and I am in the process of getting ready for work, but I have a little bit of extra time at the moment to share some thoughts on a movie I just saw earlier this week, which is a film that wasn't, of all the fall movies that are out in theaters right now or currently coming out, I can't say that I was super jacked up, pun intended, for Red One, which is the new Jake Kasdan film. That director, I would be surprised if you knew him by name, but I think he is the son of Lawrence Kasdan, and he has directed some notable films of his own. My favorite probably being Walk Hard, and he also did indie back earlier in his career that I really like, called The TV Set, an underrated little film. But yeah, I mean, I think since then he's kind of gone into like this sort of, I don't know, either like raunchy studio comedy vein, like with like Sex Tape and Bad Teacher. I believe both those were his. And then he did the two most recent Jumanji films with The Rock. And that explains why he is reteaming with Mr. Dwayne Johnson himself for this new Christmas-themed action-adventure comedy buddy film of sorts. Yeah, I mean, it's a script from Chris Morgan and a few others. I can't think of their names off the top of my head, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Chris Morgan is the main guy behind, from a writing standpoint at least, not from a directorial standpoint, but Chris Morgan is the guy who had a big hand in the Fast and the Furious franchise. I think he also wrote Wanted at one point. The big thing I remember about him, and I don't dislike the guy, I actually think, all told, I mean, his films that he wrote for like the Fast and Furious franchise are some of my favorites, like Tokyo Drift, Fast 5, Fast Furious 6, Furious 7. But there's a video that The Onion did, I think like in the 2000s, where it was like a 5-year-old boy that wrote all of these films, and like they're written on crayon, and it's like really shoddy, and like, you know, it's a really, really funny video. I don't want to give too much away about it if you plan to check it out, but it's kind of fitting. I'm already kind of feeling like I'm giving this guy a backhanded compliment and insult at the same time, and I haven't even really started my thoughts on the film, but this premise here does kind of feel like, even before I knew Chris Morgan was the guy who wrote it, it feels like something that, like, you know, a rambunctious sort of like 8 to 12-year-old boy would write up. It's basically, you're kind of getting a reinterpretation of the Santa Claus mythos. Santa Claus here is played by J.K. Simmons, in a turn that I you know, he's not in the movie a ton, but I think he's fine. I think it's hard to get a bad performance out of J.K. Simmons. I think he does a nice job here. I was, you know, amused anytime he was on screen, I'll say. But, you know, basically he's not the typical, like, overweight, holly jolly version of Santa Claus. He is, like, muscled up, you know, doing sort of like these little, like, TED Talk spiels to people, going around trying to, like, he's almost like politicking to be Santa Claus. Like, he goes to like different places like Philly to like actually meet with the kids and like hear their thoughts and all that stuff. And his number one guy is an elf played by Dwayne Johnson. Now, I guess it should be noted that it's not elf lowercase ELF, but it's an acronym for, let me pull it up here. Enforcement, Logistics, and Fortification. It's all mumbo jumbo, really. I mean, it's just like a way for The Rock to be like, I'm playing the elf, but I'm not really an elf. I'm a big buff guy. And they're part of an organization that oversees them, like this military co-op sort of thing called MORA. And that is the Mythological Oversight and Restoration Authority. And basically they get into the fold because, you know, and they kind of winkingly play this trope, but it's like also kind of supposed to be serious. The tone of this movie gets a little weird at times. But basically, The Rock no longer believes in the goodness of people, children and adults alike. You know, basically, he has noticed that more people are on the naughty list than the nice list. He is kind of just discouraged about the way humanity is going. He's been doing this for like 300 something years. He's like 500 years old now or whatever. And he is turning in his like 2-week notice. This is going to be his last Christmas rendezvous. And, you know, like Santa's not happy about it, but he respects it. But before he can really pull off this last mission of sorts, Santa gets kidnapped by a sort of side mission that's run by all people by Kiernan Shipka, who it's kind of amusing to see as I'm watching Mad Men for our side podcast, Mad Men, this is like almost like if you want to imagine a sort of alternate reality where, given some of the bad decisions that Sally Draper makes throughout the show, that she somehow gets involved with a operation to kidnap and do some nefarious things with one Mr. Kris Kringle. And yeah, basically they track it down more, to this hacker guy played by Chris Evans, who was the primary freelance guy responsible for sending the coordination, or the coordinates for where the North Pole is hidden and where Santa Claus is located. And through some, contrivances and whatnot, basically The Rock and Chris Evans have to begrudgingly team up to find and rescue Santa Claus. They go around the globe. They pull some kind of Monsters, Inc. shenanigans where they go through different doors and end up in different parts of the world. Yada, yada, yada. As a film, I had heard a lot, I'll admit, going into this. I think I saw the trailer once in passing, but I knew kind of about the film more behind the scenes than I knew, like, going into it, what was going on in front of the screen. Because there was some talk about, like, there were a lot of reshoots, there were a lot of test screenings for this film. Basically, it wasn't really something that MGM and Amazon were, like, super confident in, which was not a great sign because they spent, like, a lot of money to get it together. I think it's, like, under or maybe just over $200 million at this point. And basically, there were some reports that part of the reason why that budget went up is that actor and producer Dwayne Johnson was, like, kind of just not really fully involved. Like, he was taking hours upon hours to go to the set. He was peeing in bottles and, like, doing a lot of weird stuff. And there was some recent article that was going around, like, I think some journalist or junket person asked him about it, and he was just like, well, the hours, I don't know, but I was peeing bottles. And it's like, I don't know, that's kind of encapsulates, I feel like, where The Rock is right now. I think he was the guy for a while, I've always had sort of mixed feelings about him as an action lead, because he always felt maybe a little too subconscious and maybe a little too, like, safe in his choices and his desire to kind of chase IP and make a lot of predictable and, like, economical choices that don't really inspire a lot of creative enthusement, at least for someone like me who's just kind of casually watching his films. I enjoy his Fast and Furious films. I don't like Hobbs and Shaw. I think that's pretty terrible. And I think that just kind of encapsulates his sort of fragile ego and just this desire to, like, constantly have this one-man showmanship and just, like, kind of just feel like he needs to be making this sort of mythos about himself that is inherently sort of false, and it's just kind of a grift. But that's neither here nor there. I'm not trying to, like, lambaste The Rock in this. This is a review of the film, not the person. And he's doing, like, an A24 film with Benny Safdie next, and Moana 2. So I'm hoping this is just kind of a detour, because he did Black Adam a year or so ago, and I think that kind of took the wind out of his sails a little bit, and I'm wondering if that's maybe why his performance in this feels a little just kind of disinterested and discouraged. Maybe it's just because I had the knowledge going into it that he wasn't really feeling this, or, like, was showing the set late and whatever, because it just doesn't feel like he's really, like, emotionally invested in the project. It kind of feels like he's going through the motions. He's hitting his cues. He's doing the eyebrow arch when he needs to and all this stuff. And I do think the movie does get better and his performance gets better when him and Chris Evans team up. It's not like either of them are doing Oscar caliber performances, but I will say it does feel like The Rock kind of loosens up a little bit and, kind of gets to play a little bit more openly with a co-star. And also, it's, I think, the first film I've seen with Chris Evans since, like, Knives Out. I know he's done a lot of stuff for, like, Netflix and Apple and stuff, but they feel like movies that don't exist. Like, he did something with the Russo brothers. He did something with Anya de Armas. And I just feel like they feel like make-believe movies. I don't have any interest in seeing them. I didn't watch them. I think The Gray Man was the Russo brothers film, if I'm not mistaken. And I think Ghosted was the name of the one with Apple with the Anya de Armas. I don't know for sure. But in any case, if I'm not mistaken, this is the first film of his I've seen since Knives Out, at least live action. Maybe he did some voice work for something I'm forgetting. But yeah, I will say, I mean, it's not like in those Aspire performance. It does kind of feel like he's going, like he's filling in for like a Ryan Reynolds type, this kind of smarmy, sarcastic, know-it-all kind of personality. But I will say, I think, whether this is a popular opinion or not, I think Chris Evans fits into that a little bit more comfortably, at least at this point, than Ryan Reynolds does. And also, I do think it is kind of refreshing to see him do that because he's been Chris Evans' Captain America actor for a while, and this is the sort of stuff he made his bones with before he was cast in Captain America, like going back to like Johnny Storm and all that. And I don't know, I think, it doesn't save the movie, it doesn't salvage anything, but if I had to choose between having him in this movie or Ryan Reynolds at this point, at least as far as like 2024 goes, I think they made the wiser choice, whether it was intentional or not. And, as far as the supporting cast goes, there are some familiar faces that I haven't seen in a movie in a while as well. Like Bonnie Hunt plays Miss Kringle. And I can't even remember the last time I've seen her in like a film, like especially a live action one. Like I think it goes back to like Cars or something. I think she had like a talk show or something for a little while or something. It's just been a long time. And I was kind of taken aback to see her in a film again. And it was, she's not in it a lot. I think she maybe has like 3 or 4 scenes in total, but it is refreshing just to see her in a movie again. And you have Lucy Liu in the film as well, but Lucy Liu, maybe even more so than Dwayne Johnson, it really just doesn't feel like she wants to be there. Like all of her scenes just feel like, look, I'm here because I made this during the pandemic. I didn't know if there were going to be acting roles to come. It feels like it's very sort of stilted and emotionally disengaged. And I don't know what the reason is for that. I don't know if it's just she didn't believe in the project or, if it just wasn't something she felt she needed to give 100% to. But I was elated and then disappointed to see her just kind of based on her performance in this. But I think the standout, if I were to point out anyone in particular in the cast, and I apologize if I mispronounce his name, is Kristofer Hivju. I butchered that horribly. I'm so sorry. He's the guy from Game of Thrones. He was also in Force Majeure, and I think he was in one of the Fast and Furious. I think it was Fate of the Furious. He's the tall, I think it's Norwegian. I hope it's not Swedish. I forget if it's Swedish or Norwegian guy. Norwegian, yes. Yeah, he is a very familiar screen presence, like in the sense, like if you see him, you know who I'm talking about. But as far as these performances go, his is probably the most inspired because he's playing, without getting too much away, this sort of larger than life variation of Krampus. And the makeup for it is really, truly impressive. I mean, like, I was thinking about it as I was watching, like, if this movie were to get some sort of like Norbit level of like Oscar nomination just for the makeup and like nothing else and doesn't deserve anything else, to be clear, but like if it got like a makeup nomination, I wouldn't be mad because it is truly impressive. Like you get to this scene with Krampus and it feels like you're kind of watching like some Amazon show that like Guillermo del Toro stepped in to direct like the pilot episode for. It's kind of inventive. It's definitely the highlight of the film. It goes on for a while, like longer than I thought it was going to, but this is like over 2 hours. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised that the pacing's a little slack. But yeah, it's like this kind of oddly inspired and like better version of this movie that just kind of like happens midway through. And that's kind of odd for like a, globe-trotting sort of thing. You feel like, either like kind of like the setup or, the payoff are kind of like expected to be the better part. It's not like sort of like the destination get there. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like those little scenes like that. There's also a kind of fun sequence where like they go to various toy stores across the globe. I think they show this in the trailer, but like, like they pull out like a Hot Wheels car and then they like make it larger and that's a car they drive. And like they use like other things like Rock'em Sock'em robots and stuff. And, it's not like the most original concept in the world, but it's like little stuff like that where it's like, okay, I can see the better film here. Cause like the first 20 minutes or so are really just kind of insufferable to sit through. Like with the exception of J.K. Simmons, it's just kind of hard to sit through, like such a meandering sort of uninspired Christmas movie. And it's just like, where is this going to go? Why is this 2 hours? But, I think the middle part does salvage it at least a little bit in the sense of like, they have some more inspired bits. They have some like good makeup or some good characters that like kind of make it a little bit more tolerable, easier to go down at least than I would have expected going into this. And that doesn't obviously make for a good film, and not what I'm going to recommend, obviously. But I will say, I mean, like, I guess in the scheme of things, this is only slightly better than I thought it was going to be, just because my expectations were kind of in the pits for this one. I just, just kind of, I'm at a point right now in my life, I don't want to really get into it. But personally, I needed some distraction, and I got a screening invite for this, and I was just like, okay, I'll see your dumb Christmas movie, Rock. And yeah, well, no, it was an IMAX screening because for some reason The Rock watched Oppenheimer and was like, my mediocre Amazon movie needs to be seen in IMAX screens around the world. That's a true quote. Not obviously, I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, that's something he was saying recently to the press. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I have that much more to say. I got to get ready for work anyway, as I mentioned at the top of this. Yeah, I don't know. It's basically what you expect, maybe a little bit better. It's a film that's like kind of just designed to be, watched in the background while you're like wrapping presents or folding laundry or something. And then like the better bits, like I mentioned, are probably going to maybe divert your attention for a little bit. But then once it actually gets to like the plot and stuff, it's just background noise as you're doing what you need to do, get prepared for the prepared for the holiday season. And maybe for the Hollywood season, too, if you have to watch some awards titles like me to play some catch-up. But yeah, all that is to say, if you watch this on Amazon, I think you're kind of going to get the same experience as you would watching in theaters or in IMAX, really. I mean, I don't know, maybe enhance it a little bit, but I don't know. At this point, it is what it is. Like, I don't think most people are going to care about this. I think I've heard the box office reports, the initial ones at least, are not looking great. And I think it's just going to be probably another blow to The Rock's career and ego at this point to be like, yeah, he made another mediocre, uninspired, but also kind of casually amusing film that signifies that he, yet again, kind of needs to change the formula, which it sounds like he's going to if he's doing an A24 film with one of the Safdie brothers. So maybe this is just a lull until we get to some of the good stuff. But in the meantime, I think that's it. Oh, yeah, the other thing I was going to say was, I feel like the idea of having a jacked up Santa Claus would have been maybe inspired if it wasn't for Rise of the Guardians, which kind of just did that already over 10 years ago. But I don't know. I think the idea of having a jacked up Santa Claus in the Rock movie makes perfect sense, but also kind of feels like they missed the boat on that one a little bit. But what can you do? Anyway, that's all I have to say. I got to get ready for work, like I said, and I think that's enough. I don't think I need to spend 20 minutes in total talking about Red One. Maybe I'm going to if I keep drawing this out, but I'm going to stop myself right now. Okay, bye-bye. Have a good one.